Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Kiorkof, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 4 wide receiver rankings for the 2020 fantasy football season. On today's episode, of course, we're going to be talking about my top 36 wide receiver rankings. But before then, I want to talk about some news around the National Football League as it pertains to the Tennessee Titans and Pittsburgh Steelers game, how that is being rescheduled, and how we don't have to worry about our potential starters missing this upcoming week. Then after that, we'll talk about some matchups at the wide receiver position, which teams are giving up the most points to opposing wide receivers on a weekly basis in a half PPR scoring format. That's right. All of our rankings throughout the week are in half PPR, meaning everyone in the middle, whether you play in a standard or a full PPR. Again, after that, after we talk about matchups, we'll talk about my top 36 wide receiver rankings. Again, rankings are subject to change. For those of you who are trying to stay up to date with my rankings on a daily basis, you can go ahead and check out patreon.com/AndrewKiorkof. The description is down below. I'm making content there. You can get yourself flex rankings where I answer all of your questions. I'll get extra content in terms of Discord servers, weekly Q&As, private live streams, all that kind of stuff there. Those are, all the little perks that you can get, all that information down below in the description. Outside of that, if you want to stay up to date, you can just show up on Sunday morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Kick off with Kiorkof, Week 4. We're going to be talking about updated rankings. It'll be on screen for those of you who have joined, almost 1,000 of you every Sunday. So again, I really do appreciate you guys coming along. So just that's another option. Otherwise, we're going to get into the video. Timestamps are down below for those of you looking for specific players. Otherwise, let's talk about some news. First and foremost, the Tennessee Titans and the Pittsburgh Steelers situation. As of this moment in time, the game has been delayed from Sunday to Monday. Now, there's always a possibility that the game could once again be delayed to Tuesday. They have left that as a possibility, but at this moment in time, the game is going to be taking place Monday night. There will be 2 Monday night games as of the current schedule. Now, as of right now, I'm thinking to myself, with there only being, the 3 players and I think an extra player testing positive today, if in fact the Tennessee Titans organization could be clear for the next 2 days, then they'll probably be allowed back into the facility and they can resume at least practicing and preparing for the Pittsburgh Steelers this upcoming Monday and or Tuesday. So as of right now, do not panic. For those of you who play in a Yahoo League, I think it says that Pittsburgh Steelers and Tennessee Titans players are technically on a bye week this week. I think whoever was probably functioning or changing the script for the Yahoo app maybe jumped the gun a little bit and just gave them a bye week. I think they're going to play due to the rescheduling as of right now. So we don't have to really worry about that. Have those guys still in your lineup. We should be perfectly fine, ready to go. And that's all the news that I have regarding that. Outside of that, let's go ahead and start talking about some matchups for the wide receiver position going into Week 4. The graphic that you're going to see on screen right now shows how many points defenses are giving up to opposing wide receivers in a half PPR scoring format as of thus far this season, the first 3 weeks of the season. The Seattle Seahawks are giving up 60.53 fantasy points to opposing wide receivers thus far this season per week. That in itself, an incredible statistic. Obviously, it's not helping the Seattle Seahawks, but at least it's helping Russell Wilson stay on the field, keeping him active in the passing game, and feeding players like DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. But on the other side of the ball this week, we'll have Ryan Fitzmagic and DeVante Parker, who will probably be the biggest benefactor of this specific situation. Obviously, that is something to keep an eye on. The Dallas Cowboys, they themselves have been giving up a lot of points. Again, when you play against Seattle and against the Falcons in the first couple of weeks, it's definitely going to be shootouts, and your secondary is definitely going to be hurting. Of course, they were missing Chidobe Awuzie, their number 1 cornerback, last week. So that in itself was something of a struggle. If he comes back this week, definitely helps them out. But regardless, they play against the Cleveland Browns. They're a run-first team. So I don't really know how much they're going to use Jarvis Landry, who's kind of been disappearing over the last couple weeks, and OBJ, who's very inconsistent. We have the Falcons, of course, giving up a lot of points. Another piece of information for them, besides last week, AJ Terrell, their starting rookie cornerback, going out with the COVID-19. Darqueze Dennard, another one of their cornerbacks, out this upcoming week. So the Green Bay Packers looking like they're having a pretty safe situation go down with them. But outside of that, those are the other teams, the Minnesota Vikings, the Broncos, Browns, Patriots. These are all the other teams that are giving up a lot of points to opposing wide receivers on a weekly basis, just to kind of give you some context for a half PPR scoring format. Now, what we can also do is talk about some of the tougher matchups this upcoming week. The Kansas City Chiefs, surprisingly enough, have been fantastic. I mean, of course, they stopped Lamar Jackson from really doing anything this past week, only throwing for 97 passing yards. That's definitely going to help you in terms of your averages, but as of right now, the Kansas City Chiefs playing defense is tough. It's definitely going to be something difficult for Cam Newton to face this upcoming weekend, but again, these are some of the tougher matchups to kind of keep your eyes out on. Again, like Las Vegas Raiders, the Cincinnati Bengals, these are 2 teams that as of right now, aren't giving up a lot of points to opposing wide receivers, mainly because they're giving up all the points to opposing running backs. So kind of putting that into context as to why the wide receiver position hasn't thrived as much against them. It's mainly because they haven't had to use wide receivers against these teams because the running game is so effective. So kind of keeping that in mind. Outside of that, hopefully this gives you a little bit of context. Now that we've done that, we can go ahead and move on and start talking about my top 36 wide receiver rankings for week 4 of the 2020 fantasy football season. Starting off with my number 1. Again, he was number 1 last week, and it shouldn't be a surprise. It's DeAndre Hopkins. The amount of consistency DeAndre Hopkins has shown with this offense and his productivity over the last couple weeks has been fantastic. As of this current moment in time in a half PPR scoring format, he is the number 3 overall wide receiver. Not because he's had explosive performances like Calvin Ridley or Tyler Lockett, who are the only 2 other wide receivers ahead of him at this moment in time, but because he has just been outright consistent. This past week, 12 targets, 10 receptions, 137 receiving yards. Did not score a touchdown, but didn't need it. Still had 18.7 fantasy points. He has been absolutely fantastic. And this upcoming week, they take on the Carolina Panthers secondary, which again, we've all talked about. They cannot stop the run, but on top of that, they don't really have too many great cornerbacks. Sure, they have one great safety, but outside of him, I mean, it's really just a mess for that Carolina secondary. I mean, we just saw Keenan Allen have an incredible career game on his hands just this past week with the rookie quarterback. I think Kyler Murray, D-Hop, they're going to combine for a pretty good duo this week. He's my number 1. We move on to number 2, Davante Adams. Now, at this current moment in time, I don't have the exact injury report or the practice report for the Green Bay Packers. I'm recording this before midday of Wednesday, September 30th. So as of right now, I am not, I haven't been given 100% guarantee that Davante Adams is going to play. But what I'm kind of leaning towards, and the hope is that because of the fact that Davante Adams was a game time decision prior to the game against the Saints on Sunday night, he was probably leaning towards potentially playing that game, which means that he was probably healthy enough to, if he wanted to, potentially play, but they obviously held him out to make sure that there was not a recurring injury. So considering he was so close, I think there's a potential that with the hamstring injury, he could potentially come back this week, have himself a presence in a game again, which the top 2 starting cornerbacks of the Atlanta Falcons could be missing if AJ Terrell is still on the COVID-19 list. And that would be an absolutely incredible matchup. So again, I'm not 100% certain if Davante Adams is going to play, but if he does, he's an automatic start. As of right now, hopefully he's leaning towards maybe making a return here in week 4. We go ahead and move on to our number 3, Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill has scored a touchdown each of the last 3 weeks. That kind of productivity and opportunity in this offense is remarkable. I mean, the fact that he can score a touchdown every single week is the Tyreek Hill we want to see. We always talk about his potential volatility, and to be honest, it's eventually going to show up. But as of right now, he doesn't look like he's slowing down. Sure, his opportunity in the passing game isn't as much as some of these other wide receivers like a DeAndre Hopkins or a Calvin Ridley or a Tyler Lockett in terms of targets, but when he gets his opportunities, he's going to deliver on them. He had 6 targets for 5 receptions and 77 total receiving yards and a touchdown last week. Sure, he takes on the New England Patriots this week, but I'm not too worried about that. That secondary has been struggling quite a bit as of late. Tyreek Hill also accompanied his statistics with 25 rushing yards. As long as they start getting him involved in every different kind of formation, we saw a lot of orbit formations in which they were motioning him over, then scooping him right behind Patrick Mahomes this past week. There's one of these times that they're going to throw some screen passes to him, get him out to open field, and Tyreek Hill is going to be making some plays just like he used to do on punt returns and kickoff returns. Regardless, he's been very consistent as of late, and he's on an automatic start this week, regardless of the matchup against McCourty and or Gilmore in the New England Patriots. We move on to number 4. We have Calvin Ridley. Again, Calvin Ridley, as of right now, even without Julio Jones in the lineup this past week against the Chicago Bears, had himself a fantastic performance. Now, he had a lot of opportunity, and though he did not act upon all of it, he could have had an even bigger game. He had a total of 13 targets and only caught 5 of those 13 targets. Those still accounted for 110 receiving yards. At the end of the game, he could have had a game-winning catch. Unfortunately, Matt Ryan overthrew him a little bit through an interception. That killed the drive. But, the fact of the matter is that Calvin Ridley against the Green Bay Packers shouldn't be a big deal, especially if, in fact, Julio Jones returns. This is the only wide receiver that could be healthy this potential week. If, in fact, Russell Gage still dealing with a concussion, Julio Jones might miss. Calvin Ridley is going to be streamlined for a lot of targets, more opportunity. That only helps him. Again, he's the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy right now. He's pretty much, like we talked about this offseason, he's the Chris Godwin of this year. He's the number 2 wide receiver on his respective team that is taking over as the number 1. And he's been playing fantastic. He's my number 4. We move on to number 5. DK Metcalf. All right, so here's the thing about DK Metcalf. In a half PPR scoring format, though he's only caught the ball 4 times each of the last 3 weeks, he's been still scoring 17 fantasy points per week on average. That kind of an average is unbelievable. And this upcoming week, they take on the Miami Dolphins. Now, the Miami Dolphins, they still do have good cornerbacks, Byron Jones, Xavier Howard. Xavier Howard's still dealing with a knee injury. Byron Jones missed this last week, is hopefully trying to get back this upcoming week. Don't have the injury report on whether he practiced today. But regardless, I think that this offense, the way that DK Metcalf specifically has been playing, Tyler Lockett's been playing, and Russell Wilson, this offensive line protecting him, they're going to consistently be throwing teams off of the, usually I'd say they'd be running teams out of the gym in a basketball sense, but in a football sense, they're just going to air it out and just blow out teams. They're going to boat race them per se. So as of right now, even with, DK Metcalf running, what was it, last week against the Cowboys, he caught a, 50-yard bomb. He tried to walk into the end zone nonchalantly, got the ball popped out. It was a touchback. He could have had 2 touchdowns this past week and it probably been the number 1 wide receiver of of week 3. Unfortunately, he had to learn his lesson. Regardless, he's going to be fantastic going forward, really stepping up this year as a fantastic wide receiver option going forward. Regardless, we move on. Julio Jones is number 6. We talked about him a little bit when we were talking about Calvin Ridley, of course, but as of this current moment in time, he's also dealing with a hamstring injury. If, in fact, Julio Jones is going to return, that'd be fantastic. I'm starting him up. I have no problem playing him against the Green Bay Packers. But again, I'm not 100% certain. I just wanted to go ahead and throw him on the list because, again, regardless of what happens, rankings are subject to change. If he doesn't play, he doesn't play. But if he plays, I definitely want him in my lineup. Another one of these players that I wanted to mention, and he'll be sharing the number 6 spot with Julio Jones, is Michael Thomas. Now, Michael Thomas, I did get confirmation that he was on the practice field today. I don't know if it was in a limited capacity or a full capacity, but he did participate in parts of practice today for the New Orleans Saints. That in itself, a very valuable thing to kind of notice. Obviously, we've heard Michael Thomas say in the past that he wanted to come back earlier. He's been eyeing week 4 as his return date, even though the ambiguity of the injury in his timeline was kind of a 2 to 5 to 6 week process. Michael Thomas has come out and he said, I've played through high ankle sprains before. I can do it again. So as of right now, if he's going to practice fully this week, get himself enough reps to feel comfortable, I'm perfectly fine playing him against the Detroit Lions secondary. Again, Jeff Okudah doesn't really seem like he's going to be able to lock down a Michael Thomas-esque wide receiver, and they're desperately in need of Michael Thomas to return to the Saints offense. So hopefully he'll be back. Moving on to our next wide receiver, we have ourselves Tyler Lockett. And typically when a wide receiver scores you 2 receiving touchdowns, you're like, oh my goodness, I won the week. But 3 receiving touchdowns, that's a lock. It's Tyler Lockett. You get it? Okay, cool. Anyway, Tyler Lockett was incredible. 13 targets, 9 receptions, over 100 receiving yards, 3 receiving touchdowns, 32.5 fantasy points, dominated in the first half. As of right now, with that incredible performance, has launched himself as the number 2 wide receiver in fantasy, has had some pretty consistent performances. He's putting up like about 13, 14 points a week. But this past week, again, when he's tripling up that kind of productivity, it kind of gives him, it kind of launches him into this conversation of maybe if in fact this offense is as legit as they are, if Russell Wilson's going to throw 4 to 5 touchdowns a week, Tyler Lockett's probably going to catch 1 or 2 of them. And that's pretty much going to be the consistent part of this offense. They play against Miami. I feel like Tyler Lockett, the amount of targets he's gotten, that increasing to 13, besides, he was having 8 or 9 targets a week prior to then. The opportunity's there. If he's going to continue to deliver on it, of course, he's going to get more opportunity. And as the weeks go on, I'm feeling more and more comfortable with Tyler Lockett as a number 1 wide receiver potentially in this offense. Moving on. We have ourselves Amari Cooper at number 8. Again, speaking of targets and opportunity, Amari Cooper is tied for the 3rd most targets in the National Football League as of right now at the wide receiver position. He currently has 35 targets in 3 weeks. That in itself an incredible number. A lot of people are ignoring it because of the fact that Amari Cooper hasn't been scoring too many fantasy points. That's mainly because he has yet to score a touchdown thus far this season. Besides that, he's been absolutely fantastic in the receiving game. Just this past week, 9 receptions for 86 receiving yards. In a half PPR format, sure, it's not as much that you would have gotten in a full PPR. In a full PPR format, you got yourself 17 points a week and you're comfortably sitting there. But obviously, when we're talking about Amari Cooper in a half PPR format, he's a little bit less relevant. But playing against Cleveland, again, we've talked about their struggles in their secondary. They've had a lot of injuries, and I think Amari Cooper, I think it's time for him to have a breakout week here, potentially score his first touchdown this season. Again, the targets are going to be there. The opportunity is going to be there. If, in fact, we're getting Michael Gallup to kind of present himself, and CeeDee Lamb, Cedric Wilson, Dalton Schultz, all of these guys becoming more and more viable options, it's going to spread defenses thin. if you bring out a 5 wide receiver set, who are they going to cover? They're going to have to man cover everybody and hope that they don't get gashed by one of these guys. It's just going to continue to help Amari Cooper's availability, productivity going forward in the passing game. Regardless, we move on to number 9. We have ourselves Mike Evans. Now, Chris Godwin's probably going to miss this week with a hamstring injury. Again, he's probably going to miss upwards of 2 weeks, which is very unfortunate. But regardless, Mike Evans has been pretty good in the last couple of weeks. He scored 4 touchdowns. He is tied for the most in the National Football League with Tyler Lockett and Calvin Ridley. They all have 4 receiving touchdowns thus far this season. But the interesting thing is, just this past week, Mike Evans against the Denver Broncos, 4 targets, 2 receptions for 2 yards. 2 receptions for 2 yards, 2 touchdowns. So both of his receptions were on the 1-yard line. They didn't give it to a Leonard Fournette or a Ronald Jones to punch it in. They didn't go for the tight end in the back of the end zone with Gronk. They fed the ball to Mike Evans. Again, like I talked about last week, they're trying to get to double-digit touchdowns for Mike Evans this year. They're definitely on pace for that regardless. He had himself a pretty, okay game. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers could have looked better, but again, when in fact Chris Godwin is out of the lineup, like we saw 2 weeks back in week 2 against the Carolina Panthers, this team is going to be feeding the ball to Mike Evans. Hopefully that'll happen this upcoming week against the Chargers. Chargers got a pretty good secondary, but they're going to need Mike Evans to step up in order to find some success this week because the Chargers defense is pretty good all around. Moving on to our next wide receiver, we have ourselves Adam Thielen at number 10. And I talk about Adam Thielen at number 10 because, again, he's always going to be a number 1 wide receiver in my mind. And though he's had a little bit of inconsistencies throughout the season thus far, the breakout game that Justin Jefferson just had this past week, what was it? 9 targets, 7 receptions, $175 through the air, and a touchdown. We'll talk about Justin Jefferson in just a minute. But the fact that Adam Thielen has another wide receiver too to rely upon, now that they have their quote-unquote Stefon Diggs in this offense, it is honestly going to open up more and more opportunity for Adam Thielen. If there's another threat on the other side of the field pulling coverage and not forcing so much double coverage in the face of an Adam Thielen, if you can line up Justin Jefferson on the outside and put Adam Thielen in the slot and not really have him pull double coverage, it's going to pretty much give more and more opportunity for Adam Thielen to get open, to find himself in open space, to be able to catch the ball, make plays. And in my opinion, going forward, it's only going to help his overall productivity. So as of right now, I have him as a number 10 against Houston's secondary, which in my opinion has been struggling over the last couple of weeks. And again, they've probably, they've gotten a little bit better, even though this, they've given up a fair amount of touchdowns in the last couple of weeks. Regardless, Adam Thielen hopefully going to step up once again this week. He is my number 10. We have ourselves number 11, Stefon Diggs. Speaking of Stefon Diggs, I needed to put him right next to Adam Thielen. I missed those two together, but regardless, Stefon Diggs has found himself a very, very good situation with the Buffalo Bills. We thought to ourselves in the offseason, Buffalo Bills offense, Josh Allen, very inaccurate. Could he figure it out with Stefon Diggs? How is Stefon Diggs going to handle this entire situation of an inaccurate quarterback after playing with Kirk Cousins? Well, Josh Allen has been nothing but amazing, and it has been helping out Stefon Diggs, even with the matchup against Jalen Ramsey for majority of last week. Stefon Diggs had himself a great week. 6 targets, 4 receptions for 49 yards and a touchdown. Sure, 13 fantasy points isn't going to break, your team's lineup into the next dimension, but to be honest, I'm not complaining about it. This is 3 weeks in a row of consistent production from Stefon Diggs. Week 1 had about 13 points. Week 2 had 22 plus. Week 3 had 13 points. That kind of consistency throughout a season is going to just allow me to start him every single week, especially matchups against the Las Vegas Raiders this week with John Brown out with a calf injury. He did not practice earlier today. So again, that is another sign that he could potentially miss. I love the usage that Stefon Diggs has been Stefon Diggs has been getting. As long as he's getting more targets with the absence of John Brown, he's going to be able to deliver on them and have himself a pretty good week here against the Las Vegas Raiders. I'm excited about his potential. Moving on to number 11, we have ourselves Allen Robinson. Now, Allen Robinson has finally gotten back to his 2020 self. Again, this is a wide receiver that had 99 catches last year, 1,100 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns. That's the kind of production we're supposed to see from Allen Robinson. And finally, we saw ourselves a breakout game this past week. Now, I understand he played against the Atlanta Falcons. Everyone has produced against the Atlanta Falcons, but it is nice to see that regardless of that, he still had the opportunity and delivered on said opportunity. 13 targets, 10 receptions, 123 receiving yards and a touchdown. Had himself 23.3 fantasy points in a half PPR scoring format. Now, you get yourself an improvement at the quarterback position. You bring in Nick Foles. That in itself is going to make the offense more potent. And as you move down the field and you're not punting as much, you are going to get more opportunity in games to be able to feed the ball to an Allen Robinson. This upcoming week, they take on the Indianapolis Colts. Now, the starting cornerback that is probably going to be on Allen Robinson this game is Xavier Rhodes. Xavier Rhodes is a former cornerback of the Minnesota Vikings. So I thought to myself, let's go and look at what kind of productivity Allen Robinson has had in the past against Xavier Rhodes. He's put up good numbers against them. 9 receptions for 77 yards, 6 receptions for 70 plus yards. He's played well against them last season. There wasn't a touchdown accompanied with those, but again, it was with Mitchell Trubisky. So if in fact this upcoming season we get a little bit more production and a little bit more accurate passes from a guy like Nick Foles, I think the possibility of Allen Robinson having himself a pretty good performance against Xavier Rhodes this week is pretty likely. That's why he sits at my number 12 this week. We move on out of the top 12 wide receivers, and we begin with Kenny Golladay. Kenny Golladay had himself a great week last week. Again, the whole question mark surrounding Kenny Golladay is he healthy enough to perform? He obviously proved with 6 catches on 7 receptions for 57 yards and a touchdown that he's ready to go. He's ready to be the number 1 wide receiver of this team. And he honestly lifted this team to winning that game. Again, the defense made a lot of turnovers forced by Kyler Murray, but that being said, being able to have a number 1 wide receiver because of the absence of Marvin Jones. Marvin Jones has been horrible the last couple of weeks, really hasn't been himself. The fact that you finally get Kenny Golladay back is just going to elevate this offense, and it's going to elevate Matthew Stafford. Being able to go to a guy like Kenny Golladay on a downly basis to find consistent production and or a safety blanket of sorts is beautiful. Now, here's the thing. This upcoming week, Kenny Golladay takes on the New Orleans Saints defense, and as of right now, I'm not too worried about the matchup. Again, Alan Lazard just went off on them like a monster. Was it 146 receiving yards and a touchdown? I'm not really too concerned about the matchup on hand. I know New Orleans has a great defense, but they've been struggling over the last couple of weeks. They barely could stop Darren Waller the week before, a big target tight end like that. If in fact you bring Hawkinson into the mix, you bring Kenny Golladay, 2 big body guys, it's going to be tough for the secondary to be able to lock them down. I think Kenny Golladay has himself a pretty good week here in week 4. He's my number 13. Moving on to number 14, we have ourselves JuJu Smith-Schuster. JuJu, though he hasn't gotten the incredible target counts that he has once had in the past with Ben Roethlisberger, I remember back in 2018 with Antonio Brown on the team, there were games where JuJu was getting 16 to 19 targets. Those were just games that you could not replace. I mean, he was unstoppable in those games. But unfortunately, this year we haven't seen a consistent amount of targets go into his direction. Even with Diontae Johnson having a concussion this past week, we didn't really see JuJu really step up and grab himself 10 plus targets. But with the opportunity he was given, 5 total targets leading to 4 total receptions, 43 yards, and a touchdown. Again, that's his 3rd touchdown of the season. And as we progress, hopefully we can get JuJu Smith-Schuster more touchdowns, more total opportunity in terms of targets. If Diontae Johnson is going to miss this week, they're going to have to find him in the passing game. Playing against the Tennessee Titans secondary should not be an issue for a guy like JuJu Smith-Schuster. I expect him to step up to the occasion if in fact Diontae Johnson is gone and be able to deliver on said plan. I mean, again, when we look at last week, the Tennessee Titans got torched. A guy like Justin Jefferson going for $175, even Adam Thielen being able to score despite being locked down for a majority of the game. I think JuJu Smith-Schuster's in a pretty good matchup this week, should be fine. Move on to number 15, Cooper Kupp. Thank you, Cooper Kupp, for joining us in 2020. We love to see your face. We love to see you be able to make some plays with Jared Goff and that Rams offense, of course. That's been fantastic, but it's a little bit of a resurgence. You had yourself 10 targets, 9 total receptions for 107 and a touchdown. Great. Again, you were playing against a very easy matchup because the Buffalo Bills cannot stop slot corners, and we'll talk about that in a little bit when it regards Hunter Renfrow. But specifically with Cooper Kupp, he had a bounce back game. The next 2 weeks that he plays, the New York Giants and the Washington football team. Those are easy matchups. He should be good to go going forward. If he's going to continue to get these kind of targets, it's definitely going to continue to pile up on him. The touchdown is always beautiful to add on top of it, but regardless, if you're going to have 9 receptions and 100 total yards or something of that sort, the touchdown will eventually get there because of how potent this offense has been thus far this season with their running game and their offensive line really being able to lead the charge for this offense regardless. Moving on, we have ourselves number 16, Keenan Allen. So Keenan Allen, like I mentioned a little bit before, had a career year earlier this past week. Now, with Justin Herbert at quarterback playing against the Carolina defense, he totaled a total of 19 targets. That's tied for the most in his career. He posted that number against the Steelers back in 2018, if I'm not mistaken. But again, Keenan Allen had himself an incredible game. 19 targets leading to 13 receptions, 132 receiving yards, and a touchdown. That is the kind of productivity that we want to see and the kind of opportunity from a young quarterback like Herbert feeding his number one wide receiver. A lot of us worried about if, in fact, Philip Rivers is not the quarterback, are we going to see Keenan Allen really produce? Keenan Allen has been a top 12 wide receiver for the last 3 years. Of course, he was going to be able to find his production. We just had to finally get past Tyrod Taylor. We did that earlier than we thought we would. And now that we've gotten to this point, Keenan Allen is going to be a consistent play going forward. Playing against Tampa Bay secondary really shouldn't be too big of a deal because, again, it's going to be hard to run the ball. It's going to force Justin Herbert to have to sit back in the pocket. A lot of pressure is going to come in his way, but he's going to have to get the ball out of his hands quickly. Hopefully, that's either to Hunter Henry, Keenan Allen, and or Austin Eckler going into this week. Regardless, he should be good to go as we continue. Number 17 is Robert Woods. Again, a lot of people on Sunday morning, I remember, asked me about Robert Woods. Should I be playing Robert Woods? Yeah, I mean, guys, I'm telling you, Robert Woods, even with Cooper Kupp playing as well as he did, Robert Woods still the number one wide receiver on this team, and I expect him to continue to be the number one wide receiver on this team. Regardless of the amount of targets he's getting, he's going to potentially be able to at least keep pace or potentially surpass Cooper Kupp like he did last year in total targets. Now, as of this current moment in time, they play against the New York Giants. Again, this is a very easy matchup. Similar to Cooper Kupp, both these guys should be able to produce fairly easily. The fact that Robert Woods also was able to get a couple rushing yards per game, he had 30 rushing yards on 3 attempts this past week. That in itself, getting himself involved with those jet sweeps, I mean, it led to a touchdown in week 2. That's always an extra opportunity on the goal line for him. But regardless, hopefully we could see more touchdowns like he has scored already. I mean, remembering last season, he barely scored any touchdowns. I think he had a total of, 4 total touchdowns? He's almost at that number thus far this season going into week 4. He's going to continue to produce and potentially finish as a top 12 guy this year. Moving on, we have ourselves number 18, DeVante Parker. I talked about him a little bit before because the Seattle Seahawks are giving up the most points to opposing wide receivers thus far this season. Now, that being said, DeVante Parker has been injured thus far this season, but this past week against the Jacksonville Jaguars on Thursday Night Football, he looked healthy. He was cutting normally. He was playing against a pretty decent cornerback, the rookie for the Jacksonville Jaguars, but he still had himself a couple good plays here and there. Now, the thing was, the Miami Dolphins didn't really have to throw the ball in the second half. Even though they did at times, they really tried to kill the clock as quickly as they possibly could with Myles Gaskin. I mean, Myles Gaskin had 22 total rushing attempts. I haven't seen the Miami Dolphins run the ball that much in quite some time. So they were really trying to kill the clock. Wasn't really giving too much opportunity for guys like DeVante Parker, Preston Williams, or Mike Gesicki to produce in the passing game. Regardless, still had 5 receptions on 5 targets, 69 yards. Hopefully this upcoming week against Seattle, a very soft secondary in terms of production. Fitzmagic's going to pop off, and that's definitely going to give DeVante Parker the boost that he requires. Moving on, we have ourselves the number one wide receiver of the Cincinnati Bengals offense. That's Tyler Boyd. You know, in week 2, Thursday Night Football against the Cleveland Browns, we thought to ourselves, well, Tyler Boyd ended up producing a pretty good game, but it was in garbage time. It was the last drive of the series, of the game. Scores a touchdown after dropping a touchdown earlier in the game. Is it going to be a legit kind of crowning? Can we really give him the number one spot if in fact it was really garbage time worthy? To be honest, the Cincinnati Bengals are all going to be garbage time this year. All of their games are going to require garbage time. Until they figure out how to run the ball, it's going to be tough for Joe Burrow, and he's going to have to throw the ball like he has 40 plus times a game. Now, Tyler Boyd last week was incredible. 13 targets is the one thing that I love to see. I don't even care how many catches he has. The fact that he's getting 13 targets and they're not going in the direction of AJ Green gives me more confidence with him especially. Those 13 targets regardless led to 10 total receptions for $125, 17.5 fantasy points. This upcoming week they take on the Jacksonville Jaguars secondary. Again, when everybody's going to be covering T. Higgins and or AJ Green on the outside, we'll have Tyler Boyd in the slot position, short, dump off passes, couple slants here and there for big plays. Tyler Boyd going forward should be a great prospect, and he is my number 19. Moving on, we have ourselves number 20, DJ Moore. Now, I know you may be thinking, Andrew, 20 is a little too low for DJ Moore. It could potentially be, but here's the thing about DJ Moore. As of this current moment in time, if in fact he is not going to get more than 4 targets in a singular game, my heart's going to break. DJ Moore is such a good wide receiver, and Teddy Bridgewater is not unlocking his potential. Sure, in week 2, he did. Over 120 receiving yards, great, that's beautiful. We got to see that on a weekly basis. The coverage of a Casey Hayward should not be stopping Teddy Bridgewater from throwing in that direction. We don't have a Revis Island sitting over there. It really shouldn't be that difficult, but again, Teddy Bridgewater likes to throw the ball short. That's why Mike Davis has been, flourishing in the passing game. That's why, we really haven't seen much of Robby Anderson last week and or DJ Moore. But hopefully this upcoming week, as they play against a defense that, in my opinion, though they haven't been giving up a lot of points, the Arizona Cardinals, to opposing wide receivers, DJ Moore has the potential to break out here. Had himself a pretty good game. But again, I'm just taking it easy because I really do prefer the other wide receivers that I've mentioned before him this upcoming week. We move on. We have ourselves Terry McLaurin at 21. Taking on the Baltimore Ravens, it's not an easy task, especially when Dwayne Haskins has been playing as bad as he has in the last couple of weeks. It's a little concerning for me to think, can I trust Dwayne Haskins? Because that's what I have to trust in. I'm not trusting in Terry McLaurin because I have the utmost trust in Terry McLaurin being able to produce. But if he's not given the, ample amount of targets and or opportunities that are at least not 10 yards over his head or into the ground or into a defender's hands, then, maybe we could talk about it. But as of this moment in time, I think Baltimore's coming out for a revenge game. I think Terry McLaurin will still be able to score, potentially in the second half, garbage time, something like that. But again, they've got a pretty good secondary in Baltimore. It's going to be tough for him regardless. He sits at number 21. I still have confidence in him. But again, I'm still a little concerned. Again, last week he had 4 catches for 83 yards. He could put together 5 catches for $120 and a touchdown very easily. And he's one of the only players that can do it as easily as he can. So either way, he's my number 21. We move on to DJ Chark as my number 22. As of this morning, I did read the report that he's been cleared with his chest injury to return to practice and potentially play this upcoming week. Playing against Cincinnati, again, should be pretty good. This offense looked horrible. The Jacksonville Jaguars really looked like they were trying to get Trevor Lawrence last Thursday. Gardner Minshew just looked out of sorts. The offensive coordinator, Gruden, didn't look like he wanted to win the game. Hopefully, DJ Chark back into the lineup kind of kicks them back in the gear and puts them right in the correct spot. So as of right now, I don't know. The Jacksonville Jaguars, they play against the Cincinnati Bengals. That's another one of these teams that's going to be competing for the least amount of wins and a higher pick in this upcoming year's draft. So if the Jaguars are trying to just gain themselves, the number 1 pick, they could throw again. But regardless, DJ Chark, healthy, ready to go, is another one of these wide receivers that, in my opinion, is a must start. So we leave him at 22 with the potential of having himself a pretty good game. We have number 23, Julian Edelman. Now, Julian Edelman, after having an incredible week 2 with 179 receiving yards against the Seattle secondary, shows up against the Las Vegas Raiders and doesn't have to do anything because, to be honest, the Las Vegas Raiders defense could not stop the run. Rex Burkhead, Sony Michel, JJ Taylor, they just ran through them, and it wasn't much of a trouble at all. So Julian Edelman this upcoming week, are they going to be able to run the ball against KC? That's definitely a possibility. But if, in fact, Patrick Mahomes comes out, boat races them, puts up 30 on the board as quickly as he did against the Baltimore Ravens, that's going to force Cam to have to throw the ball. Julian Edelman has been pretty good in his career as of the last couple of years against Kansas City. He scored a touchdown in each of the last 3 matchups against them. So again, he's always been a player that is going to be able to produce. I think it's 2 out of the last 3 matchups he scored touchdown against them in the regular season. In the playoffs, I think he had like 7 catches for 97. Regardless, Julian Edelman, another one of these plays that hopefully can be relied upon going into this week in a matchup where they're going to have to score and they're going to have to pass the ball a lot. Regardless, we move on to Michael Gallup at number 24. Michael Gallup, welcome to 2020. Glad to see you. Well, let me take your bags. You can go ahead, go up to your hotel room, relax until this Sunday. Regardless, you play against Cleveland. It's a soft secondary. If you're going to get the targets like you did last week, you're going to continue to produce. Again, the fact that Michael Gallup had 9 targets, beautiful. In comparison to the weeks prior, which was like 5 or 4 targets, terrible. We don't want that. We want to see double-digit targets going forward. 6 catches for 138 and a touchdown. Shouldn't really be a surprise against Seattle, but against Cleveland, it's definitely a possibility. That's why we have that's why we have him at number 24, and that's why I've been talking about him every single week for the last, this is the 4th week now. Because Michael Gallup, as we continue, even though he didn't have good week 1 or 2, the fact of the matter is he is still in a very potent passing offense, and they're going to spread the ball out, and he's eventually going to find his footing regardless. He's my number 24. We have ourselves Will Fuller at 25. Will Fuller finally, you disappeared. You took a vacation in week 2, but at least you showed back up against Pittsburgh. 5 total targets, 4 receptions for 54 yards and a touchdown. You take on Minnesota this week. Again, I think Minnesota's secondary has been struggling heavily. They really haven't been able to find their footing there. Deshaun Watson looked a lot better last week against Pittsburgh of all defenses. So this upcoming week in a relatively easier matchup where you're not getting chased down and running for your life. And getting TJ Watt to put his helmet in your chest and you spazzing out on the sideline. There's a potential that we can have Will Fuller, the number 1 wide receiver of this team, because Brandon Cooks disappeared. I mean, to be honest, I think this is a carousel of wide receivers. If anything, Will Fuller is going to disappear this week. Brandon Cooks will come back, and then we'll just keep going back and forth while Randall Cobb catches the ball 4 times for 65 yards every single week. Regardless, I think Will Fuller could be a pretty good play this week. He's my number 25. Moving on to number 26, we have ourselves Robby Anderson. Now, I talked about DJ Moore a little bit earlier and his inconsistencies. But again, Robby Anderson, if in fact DJ Moore is going to be pulling double coverage on the other side of the field, Robby Anderson gets more and more opportunity as weeks go on. He's already put up 2 100-yard receiving games in week 1 and 2. This upcoming week against the Arizona Cardinals. Again, if in fact they're going to be missing Budda Baker, I've heard a little bit of a couple things here and there where they're going to put Isaiah Simmons at safety. Regardless, I think if Patrick Peterson's on one side of the field, Robby Anderson's going to have himself a pretty okay day on the other side in an offense where all it takes is one play for Robby Anderson to score. Again, if his floor in a half PPR is going to be 7 to 9 points, I'm fine with it because I know his ceiling is 22. And I know as long as he gets a couple more targets in these games, he'll have himself that 13, 14, 15 production. So I think he'll be great this upcoming week against Arizona. He's my number 26. Moving on to our next players. These are a couple guys that we mentioned earlier this week in the waiver wire segment. We're talking about Justin Jefferson, wide receiver of the Minnesota Vikings. As of this moment in time, if the opportunity that he was granted this past week is going to stay consistent, this upcoming week against Houston secondary, I think he has another great opportunity to be able to put up some pretty valuable fantasy points. There's a reason why many of us went and picked him up. It's because he can be an instant start going forward, especially in the next couple of weeks of their schedule. Just go look at Minnesota's upcoming schedule. In terms of the wide receiver position, it is a paradise. So if Kirk Cousins can clean up his act a little bit, not throw as many turnovers as he has. I mean, he's thrown a handful in the last couple of weeks that I'm sure he wants back. Justin Jefferson, if those targets are going to be there, the opportunity is going to be there. I'm sure Adam Thielen is going to be pulling coverage on the other side of the field and giving Justin Jefferson some pretty good opportunities this upcoming week. So hopefully that's the case this week. Moving on, Allen Lazard, another one of these waiver wire guys. Again, if Davante Adams doesn't play, Allen Lazard is playing against a secondary in Atlanta. That's all going to be backups. Again, AJ Terrell could be missing again with the COVID-19. Darqueze Dennard out this week. So those are two starting cornerbacks gone out of the lineup. So Allen Lazard could be a benefactor of that again. The crazy stat is, as of right now, Allen Lazard in a half PPR scoring format is the number 6 wide receiver in fantasy. He's had an incredible week 1, and a pretty week 2, but in week 3 popped off with 6 catches on 6 targets for 146 and a touchdown. Again, Atlanta's secondary is very soft, and with Aaron Rodgers and this Green Bay Packers offense executing as much as they have been, Allen Lazard's an automatic play regardless of Davante Adams' presence or not. We have OBJ at number 29. Again, the Dallas Cowboys secondary has not been playing well. If again, we have Chidobe Awuzie, their starting cornerback, out this upcoming week, I think Odell Beckham Jr. could end up producing well, but I want to test something, okay? Every time I put OBJ in this, 25 to 36 range, he plays well. Every time I put him in that 13 through 24 range, he plays horribly. So the plan is that if in fact OBJ is going to perform well at number 29 this week, I will leave him at this range every single week, regardless, because he's going to give his production. It's trust me, I think that I can jinx things. I mean, you can go watch my hidden gems. I literally jinx players on a weekly basis. So hopefully we're going to just do the opposite of the jinx, and hopefully OBJ produces this week. Regardless, moving on. He should have a good matchup. Again, we know how good he is. We know how talented he is. It's a run-first offense. Hopefully they can feed him the ball. Moving on, we have ourselves T.Y. Hilton at number 30. Now, T.Y. Hilton has probably been the most inconsistent great wide receiver this whole season. I mean, what has he been putting up? 5 to 6 points a week in half PPR? But the whole thing is, as of this current moment in time, Paris Campbell's injured. Michael Pittman is injured. Who else do they have a wide receiver? Zach Pascal and T.Y. Hilton. Jack Doyle doesn't run routes in the passing game anymore. Nyheim Hines gets very limited work. They're going to eventually have to throw the ball. They're not going to have as easy of matchups as they've had against Minnesota and against, the team I'm forgetting, the Jets. Of course, I'm forgetting about them because they were an absolute joke this past week. They're not going to have as many easy matchups like that as the season progresses. So eventually, T.Y. Hilton and Phillip Rivers are going to have to find a connection. I think this week, again, with all the receiver injuries they've had, it could be a pretty good opportunity for them. Moving on to 31, we have ourselves Hunter Renfrow, wide receiver of the Las Vegas Raiders. I've talked about Hunter Renfrow this past waiver wire week because, again, Hunter Renfrow plays against the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills have given up, on average, in the past 3 weeks, 100 yards to slot receivers. That's a combination of Jamison Crowder, Isaiah Ford, and Cooper Kupp in the past 3 weeks. So that in itself, pretty juicy. Now, on top of the fact that Hunter Renfrow this past week had 9 targets, 6 receptions, 84 receiving yards, and a touchdown against the New England secondary, this upcoming week, Bryan Edwards is already out. Henry Ruggs is still dealing with his injury. There aren't any other wide receivers in this offense. You play against Buffalo, who is probably going to score quickly and often. If, in fact, your running game begins to stall out or Darren Waller's not getting open, you have to pass the ball to Hunter Renfrow. He's going to be open. I remember him being a consistent play last year. He's finally getting himself back into that rhythm, and hopefully we'll be able to deliver as the coming weeks go by. Moving on, another one of these slot receivers from the waiver wire edition is Cole Beasley. Again, another slot receiver that I believe, because of the absence of John Brown going into this week against the Las Vegas Raiders, we're going to see more utilization of Cole Beasley. He's gotten a consistent amount of targets over the last 3 weeks, and his consistent production and floor sits at around 8 to 10 points in a half PPR scoring format. You add the upside of a touchdown, more targets going in his direction with John Brown out. That's only going to lead to success for Cole Beasley. I think he's a great play this week at number 32. Moving on to 33, Marquise Brown. Now, Hollywood Brown is a little scary. I honestly think that after watching that game on Monday night and then watching it again yesterday, I thought to myself, they really need Antonio Brown in that offense. We need a different kind of Brown in that offense. We don't need Marquise Brown. We need Antonio Brown to play for the Ravens, but that's not going to happen. We'll see what happens there. But regardless, Marquise Brown's a very volatile wide receiver. I know the Washington football team defense has some holes in it. They could take advantage of it, but if in fact they don't find him, on a huge pass scoring, a 40-yard touchdown, I'm afraid of starting Marquise Brown. I almost feel like, sure, there's a lot of upside and I'm willing to take the risk at times for it, but I feel like a lot of these other wide receivers that I mentioned prior to him are kind of automatic, plays and have their consistency already built in. So I'm just going to leave Marquise Brown here at 33. I know it hurts for me to do it, but regardless, we're moving on. We have ourselves CeeDee Lamb at 34. Again, CeeDee Lamb is going to get himself more and more opportunity as the weeks go on. I believe the Cedric Wilson opportunity that, was kind of thrown at his feet was obviously ran away with, and he produced accordingly. But eventually that's going to go to CeeDee Lamb. He'll have a pop-off week. Hopefully it's against Cleveland this week for those of us who are starting him as a wide receiver 3 option going forward. Again, another one of these great wide receivers that as the weeks go on is getting more experience, getting more targets, and will be able to deliver and be a consistent weekly top 36 wide receiver. We move on to Jerry Jeudy. Again, this upcoming week, they just changed their starting quarterback again. The Denver Broncos are, they've had obviously the injury to Drew Lock. They brought in Driscoll. They signed Blake Bortles, and they're not even playing Blake Bortles. They're going to play a guy that's a practice squad guy that's going to come up and play on Thursday Night Football. Of course, I don't think it's a big deal. I did watch a little bit of tape on the quarterback, and he was decent. I know he threw an interception, but he was still 8 for 9 passing. Had a couple snags to Jerry Jeudy. Hopefully, Jeudy can step up this week. Again, the New York Jets secondary is not that good. They're not going to be able to stop anybody. And I think Jerry Jeudy could be a pretty good play this week. And then our last option today I wanted to talk about is Diontae Johnson. I know he's dealing with a concussion, but as of this moment in time, he's in concussion protocol. If they play on Monday night and there's a potential that he can get out of the protocol and play because of the delay, then I don't think that he's a bad option. I just wanted to talk about him and put him out there because, again, he's another one of these players that I'm willing to play this upcoming week if, in fact, I'm given the opportunity to do because he is such a great play. And, again, I do like the matchup against Tennessee's defense, who was giving up a lot of points to opposing wide receivers last week, especially number 2 wide receivers in the form of Justin Jefferson. Regardless, these are my top 36, 37-ish with Julio Jones wide receivers for week 4 of the fantasy football season. Again, rankings are subject to change. Don't forget, you can come on out, kick off with Kiorkof for week 4, Sunday morning here on the channel, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I will be talking about some players, starting sits, updated rankings. Outside of that, if you're trying to ask me questions, get unlimited questions answered, patreon.com/AndrewKiorkof. The description of the video has all the information regarding that. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I really do appreciate you guys supporting the channel, keeping it going. Make sure you subscribe. We're going to be making fantasy football content here on the daily for the entirety of the 2020 season. Until tomorrow, we'll talk about quarterbacks and tight ends. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys. Peace.